and I upset Johnny Liston, and I just turned 22 years old. I must be the greatest. I told the world, I talk to God every day. If God's with the king, no matter if you're against the Senate. I shook up the world. I shook up the world. I shook up the world. I shook up the world.
I said, can I be a legend? Search your soul and answer me this question. Do you think I have what it takes to be great, but still be humble and learn from my mistakes? I said, can I be a legend? Search your soul.
Hi, and welcome another action-packed night here for you on this Just In, the best sports show in the Caribbean, looking at all things basketball, baseball, football, you name it, we have it. And tonight we're going to delve into three main topics: that LA Lakers and Clippers rivalry, getting my tongue twisted there.
I was about to say
all of the NBA action, of course, what's happening in the NFL, and some very strange things happening in the MLB. They just can't seem to get it right. I'm Marsha Boyce. Good night to you. And with me is Justin Marville and Neil Hoyte. Guys, how are you doing tonight?
a little hot. It's just really, really hot here. The humidity is ridiculous.
That's right, a very hot day here in Barbados. We're in the midst of summer. It would have been Kaduma Day, the jump up day here, but of course, with everything that's going on in the world, coronavirus and COVID-19 related, such mass gatherings have been put on hold. But let's jump right into it. The NBA is finally underway. The guys are hitting the floor officially now. We're not scrimmaging anymore. It's real states now, essentially, as people would say. So let's start. Lakers, Clippers. The Lakers beating the Clippers in that first game. Justin, your thoughts on that matchup? Can we really take anything from it?
For me, yes. And this is going to sound very surprising. I know a lot of the analysts and fans who watched the LA rivalry game actually said that they believe that there are problems for the Lakers in that Montrezl Harrell and Lou Williams, two reserves for the Clippers who average about 19 to 20 points each. Lakers had to squeeze out essentially a last-second win on the final possession of the game. But in terms of the standing of both teams as it relates to them playing each other, Marsha and Neil, as much as Lakers barely won, I want to say that if they had to match up again, I think the problems are the Clippers side. And I know Neil must be there smiling, hearing me saying that. And I'll explain why it came to that conclusion. The very first thing is, as much as the Clippers were out without their two-star reserves, you got an atrocious game by LeBron James, at least by LeBron James's standard. And not only did the Lakers win, but, for a lot of the game before, I want to say a lot of the first half, they were in control, dominated the first half. Secondly, going into that matchup for the all year round, the Clippers' biggest issue was always going to be how do they match up with Anthony Davis. And yet again, we watched in that game, Anthony Davis completely had his way. Bringing back Montrezl Harrell and Lou Williams does not change that fact. Like, it's clear that they have no answer for Anthony Davis. But the two biggest takeaways for me in that game are always late game situations, and you get to see how teams are going to play when the stakes are highest. As we all know, Kawhi Leonard was having a great game up to that point, and then those last four possessions, LeBron James switched on to him. Now, Neil would tell you, because I was messaging him as the game was going on, asking him, does anyone not realize that Kawhi Leonard is only going right? Yeah. And so then LeBron James switched on to him, sat down on his right hand and forced him to go left. And for 4 straight possessions, LeBron James forced the ball out of Kawhi Leonard. Marsha, that is a bad look for me, because this is the person you're supposed to close games with, and LeBron James successfully forced the ball out of his hands for 4 straight possessions. And then on top of that, for me, Neil is going to look at me with a smirk and say, I told you so. the Lakers have found the player that they need most when LeBron James is saying no. In that, I was worried they do not have anybody to create any semblance of offense, whether for themselves or for somebody else, when LeBron James is not on the floor. And they found that person in Dion Waiters. And it was so good to see that Dion Waiters, now coming off a however long absence out of the NBA, was able to contribute. I think it was 4 of 8 for 8 points immediately. Oh, sorry. And the other thing Neil is going to smell about and tell me you told me so, Kyle Kuzma turned up for that game.
Hey.
And you saw the Kyle Kuzma that the Lakers have been hoping for all along. I think he had 16.
By the way, Justin Marcus says hello. Good night.
He really doesn't, but he probably is saying it if he was watching the show. But yeah, so for as much as Lakers merely pulled out one possession victory, with the Clippers still missing Montrezl Harrell and Lou. The reality is Clippers had their 2 best players as the Lakers. And again, I saw positive signs. Like they couldn't stop Anthony Davis. LeBron James had one of his worst games these seasons. They still won. You have the guy who will be able to take out the creation with LeBron James on the bench, and they still don't have an answer for Anthony Davis. So, like, if I am LA, as much as I barely won that game, I am feeling good about a possible Western Conference Finals rematch.
Now, Neil, as a Lakers man, you've beaten the Clippers, but you lost to the Raptors. You know, LeBron James already saying that first game was the most tired he has ever been after a game. You know, you saw the images of him stretched out in the room, etc., etc. How are you feeling about it?
To be honest, I feel so. It's a mixed emotions, right? So I'm glad that we won against the Clippers. However, to add to some of Justin's, I mean, I do agree with Justin when he's saying that they still had problems. LeBron James was not really up to his normal standard, as well as AD was playing very well. And Montrezl Harrell and Lou Williams will not make any difference. However, I am concerned at their perimeter defense. Justin alluded to it about the defense on Kawhi Leonard, but Paul George has 6 threes. When Lou Williams comes back, he is another mouth you have to kind of keep the food out of, right? So the issue I'm seeing here is perimeter defense, and that concerns me because it seemed at times that Kawhi Leonard, he was playing and getting to his spots. Kawhi Leonard was efficient as he normally was in terms of getting to his spots, especially down in the third and stuff. Paul George he's playing really well since the resumption of the NBA. But honestly, I'm concerned about the defense. I know LeBron James playing well would be obviously an offensive threat, and Dion Waiters was a bright spark. Kuzma, I know he's inconsistent, but that is something that he can give us. So it is good to see that he is also making himself a threat. You have Alex Caruso. He played well. So, I mean, I am not worried about the offense so much. It's the defense that has me kind of worried. And it's not even just to say about the LA Clippers. I mean, if you can't guard the perimeter going into playoffs, especially looking at some of these teams that can be coming out the West, it can be really, really rough goings if they can't kind of sit down and be disciplined on their defense. No, the loss against the Raptors concerned me only in that LeBron James also did not look like his normal self, right? Mm-hmm. So I am concerned if we are finally seeing Father Time catch up to LeBron James. I'm wondering if this layoff kind of this inactivity for him got his body to kind of acclimate.
He probably needs like a jump start, so to speak.
Right. I mean, don't get me wrong, Neil. Like, I can understand your concerns as a Laker fan, but I will tell you, for me, if I was a Lakers fan, I would not be too concerned about the Raptors' loss, in that you did what you had to do against the Clippers to basically all but shore up the top seed in the West. A matchup against the Raptors, in my estimation, doesn't mean anything right now. I mean, 2 reasons. One, they're in the East, and 2, me personally, as much as the hype, and I want to get to that later on, Marsha, surrounding Toronto, a lot of people know picking them as their sexy pick to get the NBA Finals. I
always had them as my dark horse. You could go back to early out. They were my dark horse.
I mean, and you know they're reigning champions, huh? Like,
right.
Yeah,
You can't just ignore that.
Yeah.
And to Neil's credit, this is not me saying Lakers should have no concerns, because the 3-point shooting seems like it's something left to be desired. The defense, as Neil alluded to, and I always thought that would be an issue when you're missing your best perimeter defender in Avery Bradley. So there are issues, but like the Raptors lost, if I am Frank Vogel, LeBron James, and company, I wouldn't be overly concerned, because again, you're not, like, you've done what you had to do to secure the top seed, and you're likely not going to face the Raptors anyway. So, man.
Right. So that was the point I was going to make, right? Like, my concern is not necessarily that we don't match up well with the Raptors, or I am concerned in a 7-game series or what have you, because whenever we see them, if we do ever see them down the road, it's going to be at in the finals. So I'm not concerned about them. I'm more concerned with how the team look and some of their issues, both on offense and defense. Justin alluded to 3-point. LeBron James look a little fatigued, but I'm not worried or concerned about LeBron James. I'm just worried that could lead to something a little more. I don't even want to say the word. Right, but I don't want to say it. But you're just seeing certain things happening that has me concerned. And the biggest concern I have of the 2 games that I just saw is the defense. The defense to me is very concerning. As I said, coming out the West, you may face, if you go the first round, you're gonna be facing Ja Morant and the guy, what's his name, Jackson Jr.
Jaren Jackson Jr. Yeah.
Jaren Jackson Jr. Right. So you can be facing 2 of them. And that's a lot of pressure. So in the end, you have to, and they're a young, scrappy team, right? So, as much as there should not be a problem in facing them in the first round, you still don't want the team to give you problems and carry you to 6 or 7 games, especially when you see LeBron James is not looking fatigued, seeing that they're not really in shape, and who knows if they're going to be in that much shape come the first round of the playoffs. So my concern is more on the defensive side, to be honest.
I mean, LeBron James did allude to this when, reporters asked him, is he going to take this layoff? And remember, he said no, because his body is so accustomed to him, being at particular times, particular stages at particular times in the season. And for right now, this is August. Then, so now his body is like, this is uncomfortable for his body, and as we know, LeBron James is someone who spends like $1 million a year on taking care of his body. So he trains his body. So right now his body, it really should be an off season, and that's maybe what you're seeing right now. But I still think he's going to find a way to do it. I think he's smart enough to be able to reset for the playoffs, and maybe that's what you're seeing, like him trying to save himself. Just willing himself along before he can turn it on for the playoffs. So I wouldn't be too overly concerned.
Yeah, I'm not too worried. As I said, my only worry is a word that I will not say.
Okay.
Even my phone agrees.
Should be worried about
that. But, right, but no, I actually, to be honest, I am concerned. Justin made mention to it about a report saying that after such layoffs, certain things happen.
Well, so far, Neil, we've been able to avoid, and I will call the word for you, the injury front so far, other than, I think it was Jonathan Isaac, who had
Isaac from the Orlando Magic, which is very ironic.
I guess apparently not kneeling is actually bad for your knee, apparently.
We're going to get to that in a moment. But in terms of looking at the games that have also gone so far, Milwaukee Bucks, other people have them as title contenders as well. They barely got over the Celtics, but they lost to the Rockets. Speaking of the Rockets looking really good. Westbrook and Harden, showing some signs that we can really work together and pull this off. So your take on these 2 teams, Justin, first the Bucks and then the Rockets?
The Rockets, I don't want to be, for a team that's won both games, I'm going to call it that Milwaukee game. I don't know what happened there. They had no right winning that game whatsoever. Like, you were out-rebounded, I think, by 29, and Milwaukee had, I want to say, a 7-point lead or 9-point lead with about less than 4 or 3 minutes remaining.
It's actually held them to under 40% shooting.
And then you held them to under 40% shooting, taking a ridiculous 61 threes in that game. I think that's an NBA record for threes attempted. I want to say that is not a recipe for that. That's why I'm not sold. As I keep telling you, basketball is basketball. No matter whatever smoke and mirrors you want to try, or do different things to try. You stop playing a traditional forward or center, have people 6'7", 6'8" as your tallest person, so you're freeing the key for Russell Westbrook to lay out the ball. But for me personally, I always tell people rebounds win games, because there's no certain way to end a possession like a defensive rebound.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can't stop people from getting second and third chance opportunities, that may look good during the regular season, et cetera, but when it comes time to playoffs, and we always say this on this particular show, the difference in playoffs and regular season is that every single possession counts. So when you're not getting stops on, let us say, for argument's sake, if you're getting out-rebounded by 29, then that means likely that a third of your possessions you're not getting stops on, or stops. A third of these stops you're not getting rebounds on. That's going to come problematic. That's going to get you past particular teams, but when it gets to the Lakers and the Clippers, the Nuggets of the world, who will definitely make you pay for every second and third chance opportunity you give, that Marsha Neal, that is not a recipe for victory. I'm sorry. And then depending on who they meet, they may not even get out the first round. If they play a Denver in the first round, I'm sorry, I'm going to take Denver. Then you ask.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
And then you asked me about the Milwaukee Bucks. No, sorry. It feels like I'm just here picking my favorite teams or picking my favorite players to go on. The Milwaukee Bucks the defeat against Houston, I want to say that looked terrible. You out-rebounded by 29, hold them to under 40% shooting, up by 7 or 9 with a particular amount of minutes, and you couldn't close. I want to say that doesn't happen again. And to be fair to them, Pat Connaughton nor Eric Bledsoe played in that game. But, that is a bit troubling. But what it will go on is that that's the first time all season that they have done that. So I'll just put an asterisk on that and say I won't expect them to do that again. And I still have to have them favored coming out of the East. I know Toronto's everybody's chick pick right now, but I was doing some counting right before this show. And the reality is recent history keeps telling us superstars win titles. Not coaching, not organizations, superstars win titles. And if you count back last year, Kawhi Leonard.
Hold on. Who's the superstar on the Detroit Pistons?
Right, but I said recent history. So I'm going to get to that. So if you count back from 2005 on, so from here on last year, you can't discount that Kawhi Leonard is no longer there. Yes, Toronto has done marvelous, has done tremendous without him in the regular season. Possessions count, and we can't on one breath say that Kawhi had one of the greatest postseasons last year, and then come back and say, well, not having Kawhi Leonard is not a big deal. So Kawhi Leonard last year, 2 years in front of that would have been Kevin Durant. Then the year in front of that, LeBron James, Steph Curry before that. 2 years in Kawhi Leonard again in San Antonio. 2 years, LeBron James. Before that, Dirk Nowitzki. So you can keep going back. And the recent history tells you that. And Kobe Bryant before Dirk Nowitzki. Before that, KG, Paul Pierce, Ray Allen. So recent history tells me that to win an NBA title, you have to have at least one superstar, because when possessions count, when things are on the line, at this stage, everyone knows already what you're doing. So there's no smoke and mirrors, no coaching. Everyone knows your players already. It comes down to start being able to whether I'm going to put the ball in the basket myself, create for others. That's how it goes. So I can see Toronto beating the likes of your team, Boston, maybe Philadelphia, Miami Heat. Giannis Antetokounmpo is the best player in the NBA, and I'm not buying Toronto actually.
And then moving on from the Bucks and the Rockets, what about the Pelicans? They're looking iffy.
I'll let Neil take, because that's Neil's second team, so I'll let Neil take that one.
Yeah, so we all know, I mean, we don't have any proof, but Justin and I spoke about this last season, right? And we all know that the Pelicans really, this whole 22 teams and this playing and playoff, whatever you want to call it, is really for the benefit of having Zion Williamson and the Pelicans into the playoffs. The more you see Zion Williamson, the more you are going to make up some of that TV money you lost during the quarantine. The pandemic, right? But the truth is, they are missing some opportunities, right? So first things first, they cannot defend anything going to the ring. Let's be honest. Their defense is porous, or as Justin would say, it's poor, right? So it is one of those things where they can't defend anyone. Their offense sometimes stagnates with Brandon Ingram. Lonzo Ball is, I don't know, he's terrible at the ring this year. And
this year,
I know you can say,
sure.
hold on.
This year,
right? I know he is worse than previous years, right?
Okay. Thank you.
Right? Derek Favors is literally just a body out there. You have Josh Hart is a spark, I guess, but he's inconsistent. JJ Redick. I mean, when you look at JJ Redick to hit, I think he had 39 points the other night. When you look at JJ Redick for your, he is carrying your teams on certain nights, you have a problem. This man is 37 years old. He really and truly is a runoff screen type of set shooter. So you have issues, and Zion is not being. He is being shackled. He's being, on a minutes restriction. So he's not even given the keys to kind of run rampant. And even if he does run rampant, you kind of worry how effective he would be. Yes, he would give you points and rebounds, and he would change the energy of the game. But I don't know if that's enough for them to even get into ninth, much less eighth. Because right now, the Spurs are in ninth, and Portland is in 10th, if I remember. And then it's New Orleans. So, and the way Portland is playing, even in their loss the other night, I still think that they're the better team to make it. Spurs as well, because of their coaching and some of the pieces they have. The Pelicans just, to me, don't seem up to the challenge in terms of their defense and their offense, because there are times where their offense stagnates terribly.
Neil is being diplomatic here, as usual, as he typically is on this show. So we all have our roles. So I'll be that guy, Marsha.
Yes, be the Rebel Rosa that you are. Embrace it.
If I am Adam Silver, I am calling the wife of the late Saints owner, because I believe that's who also owns the Pelicans. And I'm asking, what the hell are you out there doing? How is it that I created this 23-team bubble for the
Saints? I'm going to turn up, essentially.
And you are not only do you not turn up, but all of a sudden now you have a minutes restriction on Zion. But this is the guy this is the reason why I have the Wizards in the bubble, my Phoenix Suns in the bubble, San Antonio Spurs in the bubble, the Sacramento Kings. Because remember when we were talking about this before the restart, we kept saying we should go directly to the playoffs. And for some odd reason, they were saying, no, there are some teams that may make it. We're going to include 23 teams, and the Wizards got in, and the Sacramento Kings got in, my Phoenix Suns. This was all for Zion Williamson. And then what do the Pelicans turn around and do? Put him on a 15-minute restriction. I would be so livid as Adam Silver. I would make a forget the owner. I'm calling Alvin Gentry directly and asking, what the hell are you doing? I don't care what happens to Zion Williamson. Make sure he is out there for no less than 35 minutes a game. This is madness.
35 minutes, boss?
Why do we think...
Hold on, from 15 to 35?
It's not like they're going to go deep into the playoffs anyhow. So they could as well play the minutes now.
So because we're all agreed on this show, the reason that all of these also rants are in this bubble is to justify why the Pelicans, or why we are going to include the Pelicans, which is to make sure that we are getting the TV money that Zion Williamson is going to bring in, and hopefully a first-round matchup between the King, LeBron James, and the heir apparent Zion Williamson. And Alvin Gentry said, well, screw your plans. I have my own plans. And part of that plan is clearly not making money for the league. Like, I would be pissed. And Marsha, you know that I am one who is not about sacrificing on like players for
Player
money.
health, yeah. Mhm.
But no, not this time. Not this time, no, Marsha. This is madness. And I would like I would really be pissed. And obviously you can't hand down penalties or do anything to them, but
There's nothing to do about it other than, as you say, make a call.
I'd make a call, and there'll be some very, very stern words, no pun intended, on the late great David Stern.
But honestly, I literally was just thinking that David Stern, God rest his soul, if he was alive, I believe that call would. Adam Silver to me don't strike me as that kind of guy. But David Stern for sure would be like, yo.
And before I go any further, for those who are new to the show, let me quickly say, y'all have to know that I am one of the greatest Adam Silver fans in the entire. I believe he is the greatest sports commissioner in all of sports. Those who have gone and those who are currently here. But I can tell you the late, great David Stern was not having any of this. David Stern, God rest his soul, is not letting anything come between him and his TV revenue. We won't get into the Michael Jordan business, but as I said, there was no way.
It's a new season, Justin. It's a new season.
I'm letting that go. But David Stern was not letting this madness go down. Zion Williamson, 15 minutes a game. You know, there's that meme with your guy, Shannon. Nope. Not happening.
Yeah, now, guys, away from the games actually restarting, the NBA is also making some, news off the court, where you have some players, for varying reasons, opted not to participate in the various social justice demonstrations and messages, etc. So we have Jimmy Butler, we have Jonathan Isaacs, and we have Myers Leonard. So in Jimmy Butler's case, his thing is, he wanted to play in a blank jersey. That the league said, no, that's not going to happen. Before we came into the bubble, he had said, none of the slogans or none of the allowed graphics, etc., appealed to him. They didn't represent what he felt was important at that point in time. So having opted to go with a blank jersey, he was now forced to play with his jersey with his name at the bottom. In the case of Jonathan Isaacs, his thing is he supports the movement, and Jonathan Isaacs is Black. He supports the movement, but he's also an ordained minister. And the perspective is that from his religious point of view, let me give you the direct quote. For me, Black lives are supported through the gospel, and all lives are supported through the gospels. So he doesn't think that kneeling or putting on a t-shirt would do it for him. And then we have Myers Leonard, who's white. He chose to stand for the anthem. And his thing is, he supports the cause, but he also respects the military and the flag. Quote, I think I can be a beacon of light, not only for my voice of platform or action, but in everything I do. I certainly support Black Lives Matter. I am aware of what is going on, but I can be both. My patriotism runs deep. Your thoughts on this? Because people are on either side. Should players be criticized for not taking part?
Well, to be honest, I don't have a problem with. Okay, first let me start with the thing, right? So in Jimmy Butler's case, he came on with no name on his jersey.
Yes.
And the league made him, before jump ball, change his jersey to one with a name on it. The reason being there was no that was not an approved message that you can do on the jersey. I would say that I don't have a problem with that. I am not sure if that is a communication thing or if Jimmy Butler was just risking or what have you. But I have no problem in that instant. The simple fact that people are today now Googling what happened with Jimmy Butler is bringing awareness to it already. So I don't have a problem with that. And I think he even said that because even after the game, he was interviewed about it. He said he don't really care. I think the objective of people realizing he had to change his jersey and it making news is point enough.
Yeah.
for that message. When it comes to other players deciding not to kneel, I have no problem with that. I have no problem with Jonathan Isaac. I didn't know about the ordained minister and all lives matter, whatever. But to be honest, I don't have a problem with a player, black or white, deciding not to kneel, right? Because at the end of the day, you don't know players' background. Greg Popovich, he didn't kneel when they had their game, their opener. And obviously his military background, his armed force, he was, I can't remember which branch, but he was a part of the military. So I don't have a problem with people not kneeling. People have family in the military. People may see it as, disrespectful to the armed forces or what that means, even though that is not what it is about.
Yeah.
I still don't have, at the end of the day, it is not about the anthem. It is not about the flag. It is about the message behind it. So once you support the message behind it, I have no problem. You can kneel, stand, you can do whatever. The fact is, it is about raising awareness toward the injustices that African American and Black people suffer at the hands of the police and even everyday citizens in the United States. So, the names are fine. The platform, people are saying what they have to say in their interviews and everything is fine. Stand, kneel, whatever. Once you're on the right side of history, as you talk out and speak out against these injustices, I have no problem with it. To Jonathan Isaac and his injury, it is unfortunate that he was injured. I went to basketball today and there was some commentary saying that there was some karma involved, but I wouldn't get into that.
As someone who has torn their ACL, I will not wish that on anybody.
Yeah, I would not wish that on anybody. That's the truth. But it's just unfortunate he was injured. Justin did make mention, as I said earlier in the show, that a doctor did say that is something that would happen. So it's just one of those things. But in terms of back on message, in terms of players deciding not to kneel, that's once you are speaking out against the injustices and using whatever platform you have, however you want to speak out on it, that's fine. As I said today on the court, LeBron James is not wearing, Black Lives Matter or anything on his jersey, equality or freedom for all or anything like that. He's rocking James, but he is still using his platform and his voice to speak out against the injustices. So I have no problem with kneeling, standing, whatever. It is where your heart is and how you use your influence to get message out there.
I agree with Neil to an extent. No,
Of course.
Of course, I can't come on the show and agree with everything you say.
No, that's not the type of show.
Would make for very boring viewing. Let's take it case by case, like Neil just did, because. Well, let me start by saying I agree with Neil to say that. I can't come and tell you have to kneel. You have to put.
It's an individual decision.
Right, because then that's no different from the other way around when people told us not to kneel. Like, how then can I come and tell you, I'm upset that you told me I can't kneel because you're telling me no is not the time, that is not the way. And then they come in now and say no because history, know that this is on the right side of history, saying that you have to kneel. So that would never be my stance. But, sorry, I find some of these cases a bit disingenuous. So I'm going to start case by case. Now, you mentioned Jimmy Butler. Now, I had no problem with that because, as Neil correctly said, I think that was a ploy to get his message out. He may not have seen, or according to him, he didn't see any of the pre-approved messages that were, that sat well with him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So he said, all right, let me come on the court without a name on my jersey, knowing full well that will make a story because they're going to ask me to change the jersey and put back on my name. And Jimmy's no fool. He knew full well that was not allowed, being nameless. And as you saw, he didn't kick up a fuss about having to go back and put on his jersey. And the NBA was well within its rights because obviously these things were agreed to before the start of the games.
Yeah.
And I think, as I said, as Neil said, Jimmy knew what he was doing. One, I have no problem with Greg Popovich's Pop's stance either, because this is a guy who has from day one lent his voice to the cause. You know where Pop stands, but Pop doesn't have to kneel. Pop doesn't have to put on a shirt because those things are, I don't want to say that they're small and insignificant, but for somebody who has been speaking for years on the matter, like I know where Pop's heart lays. I know what he stands for, and Pop's voice is so much louder than any kneeling or any t-shirt will ever do for him. So I understand his situation. Now where it's getting ticklish now. Jonathan Isaac. Again, let me say wholeheartedly, I have no problem not telling anyone they have to kneel, nor am I saying that you have to put on a shirt. My issue with Jonathan Isaac, Marsha Neal, comes in his reasoning for not doing such. What does your ministry and your faith have anything to do with the situation?
That's a harsh statement. Of course, his ministry and his belief.
Right, I'm going to get that, Marsha. At what point does your ministry or your faith say you cannot do this during an anthem? Are you saying you're tying the anthem of the United States, which I must quote to both of you, came out of a very, 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 very terrible time in United States history where slavery was legalized, and blacks were treated as property. And the anthem itself makes mention to that. How does your ministry and your faith dictate that you pay respects to the anthem? That's my problem. Like, if you're coming and tell me you're not standing or you're not kneeling or you're not wearing a shirt, then I understand that. You could have left that. But why are you referencing your faith and your ministry? I don't
understand where he's coming from, because if I look back at his quote here, he's saying personally for him, kneeling or putting on a t-shirt is not the answer. Black lives is supported through the gospel, and all lives are supported through the gospel. If you take it from the perspective of, I wholeheartedly believe that all lives are supported through the gospel, there are those then, not necessarily that I personally agree, me, Marsha Boyce, but there are those who will say, it is not my mission to push one set of human beings over another. Right now, as far as the gospel that I serve, all lives matter. So for me, if the reasoning makes sense to him based on his religion and based on his faith, I don't think it is fair for us to sit here and argue against.
No, but that's the problem. The reason doesn't make sense. No.
To you.
Hold on, Marsha. You just made a critical point. The crutch of his matter is that his ministry is not here to put any lives above any race, any creed, anyone above anybody else. But that's not what the Black Lives Matter movement is about either. Black Lives Matter is not trained, and there's a problem, and it's a terrible interpretation. The Black Lives Matter movement is not trained to say that Black lives are more important than white lives, than any other lives. So then you can't come and say that your ministry is, or your faith is not about putting any life above, because that's not what Black Lives Matter is saying. Black Lives Matter movement is trying to say.
If he wants to focus on, all lives being, quote, supported through the gospel, and he wants to hold on to that, I can see, not that I agree, but then I can see why he might lean to a particular direction.
But say that, but then and not you, but Jonathan Isaac, is making the inference that Black Lives Matter movement is trying to make it that Black lives are more important than anyone else. And
he hasn't said that specifically.
Right, so but that's what. But when you say that your gospel supports all lives, you're then inferring that the movement is trying to put one set of lives above another, and that's not the case. And that is why I have an issue with what he said, like, not the action, but the defense of it. And then, you know me, I don't believe in coincidence. I don't want to tarnish the young boy's name.
We're not going there.
But I hope you do know that his immediate actions led to something else of financial gain. I hope you do know this. Because directly after that, Jonathan Isaac's jersey is now the second highest selling jersey of those players in the bubble. And I will just leave it at that.
He has no control over that, though.
I'll just leave it there, Marsha and Neil. I'll
just leave it there. Marsha, you can't say that. You can't see a conspiracy theory. You can't see this conspiracy theorist trying to put.
I'm just saying, I don't believe in coincidence. And after your actions, all of a sudden, no.
But remember, as the thing goes, correlation does not equal causation.
Agreed.
Yes, he made a statement. Following that statement, his jersey sales might have increased because the statement he made appealed to a certain set of people. But we can't sit here and say, okay, this was why. No.
I didn't say either, but I just find it ironic. In the case of Miles Leonard, no. I'm a bit more understanding because I follow him on IG, and I'm not saying I know him personally because obviously I don't, but his words, his actions would lead me to believe that this is not just an apologist, but a supporter of the cause. And again, remember I said I have no issue with somebody not kneeling or not putting on a shirt. Like, it's a personal issue. My only thing is, and I can't say the issue or concern, is a bit of the optics. Like, and I'm not being critical of anyone again. My thing is, though, unity and team togetherness. And I would say that me personally, I have served in certain positions of leadership in former companies. I once served as a union rep. And while I may not agree or, completely see eye to eye with somebody, if we as a team, because at the end of the day, we all had to work together, just like all NBAs have to play together. If we come with a stance and said, this is what we're all doing as a team, then to me, sometimes it looks awkward. And again, I'm not criticizing, but it would tend to look awkward that everyone else is in unison in certain things and I'm alone in standing. If you get what I'm saying, it kind of looks a bit weird. But
if the individual is comfortable with that awkwardness, then there's no issue.
For me, if the team is comfortable with the awkwardness, then fine. If the team has decided, yeah, Jonathan and yeah, Miles Leonard, we support you, no problem. But again, let's take for instance, and when there were certain players following Colin Kaepernick's stance of kneeling. Sounds odd to say stance and kneeling in the same sentence, but he knelt and others. But then when a particular faction, and they won't call names, came out against them, you saw what every team did after that. It was a sign of unity to say that we are all one. So whether I agreed with kneeling or whether or not, you saw everyone arms locked together, showing one body, one force, one voice. And I'm not one to be critical of Jonathan Isaac or Miles Leonard, but in certain situations, I would like to see unity. And if the team had no issue with the two standing, also be it. But it just looks weird.
I agree with you with the need for unity, but at the end of the day, it is a personal decision. And if somebody is so convicted on either side, it is not my place to tell them, okay, you must fall in line.
Because that's the same, that it'll be a hypocrite, because I have a problem when, as you know, we peacefully protest. We kneel. That is not the way, that's not the time. We march. That's not the way, that's not the time. So then, on the flip side, then I cannot be the hypocrite and then tell you have to kneel or you have to put on a shirt. That's never going to be me. As you correctly said, I agree. If you're personally convicted, then no problem. And as I said, in the case of Miles Leonard, I had no issue. My problem comes in Jonathan Isaac. There are holes in his defense because you can't tell me that your ministry says I am not.
When it comes to matters of religion, Justin, so if we're going to talk about a personal conviction, when it comes to matters of religion and faith, regardless of what you believe in, I don't think it is your place to say X.
I see you, Marsha, but you can't tell me that, because then you are misrepresenting. Your words have misrepresented the movement, or your inferences to me. Go ahead, Neil. Sorry.
But I don't mean to cross, right? But to be honest, I think it's one of those things where I almost feel as though Jonathan Isaac is not fully aware or educated on what these issues really mean.
I agree with you wholeheartedly.
He is detached from it to some degree, right? Because if you fully understand that.
Sorry, Neil, not to cut you. Just for clarity for our viewers, just in case it wasn't clear. Jonathan Isaac is black and Miles Leonard is white. So just to set the basis for that. So you can go ahead.
Right. So it's not that Black lives are the only lives that should matter. It is not that Black lives are better or more valuable or more not supposed to be protected more so than any other race. It simply means that Black lives are not seen or not treated as important or as human as the other races, right? It is not saying that there is a preference of race. It simply means that as a white person, as a person of mixed heritage, a person, even Latinos, even though sometimes they're discriminated against when they speak, but generally speaking, once you're a Caucasian, you are safe. Once you can weaponize your skin color, which we have seen with the woman in the park calling the police and other examples we've seen coming up, when you can see people saying, I'm going to call the police because I feel threatened, and the person is in no way screaming, shouting, threatening. I saw one woman was stopping a man from entering her building. The man lived there, and she was saying the man can't live there. And when
I saw that one.
When he forced himself past the woman, because the woman was blocking the door, and the man wanted to go into his space, his home that he pays rent for. When he pushed past her, she was like, I feel threatened. I'm going to call the police. Why? Because you know what will happen. At the very least, he will be arrested or he'll be reprimanded. At the very worst, we know what can happen. And it is so to me, Jonathan Isaac, needs to be educated and or be reattached to what the message really means.
And that's
what about the first part of his statement, though? In terms of, you know what, kneeling and putting on a t-shirt, personally, is not the answer for me.
And that's why I said I have no problem. Right, agreed.
Right,
that's fine. But it's the second part where, and that's why I said, your inference is misrepresenting the movement. You're then saying, when you say that your gospel is representing all lives, then you're saying then that the movement is trying to say that only Black lives matter. And that's not what the movement
lives should matter.
Right, and that's not what the movement represents. And that is why he had a problem with his reasoning. Him not wearing a shirt or him not kneeling is of no consequence to me. Is that when you say these things and you're saying your ministry is doing this, you are misrepresenting what the movement is about. And I have a problem with that. And as I said, maybe is not being disingenuous, more so than what Neil is saying, is that you are not educated enough about what the movement is. And I think then you should go and re-educate yourself as to what is really going on.
Right.
So we'll wait and see if in the coming days, there will be further clarification or explanation, as tends to happen in these times when people seek to clarify their statements. But moving on quickly as we're moving to the end of this show, turning our attention to Major League Baseball now. We went through, okay, baseball is not going to play, to, yay, baseball is starting, to what is really going on? Baseball might be coming to an end. You had a situation where the Cardinals, they've had a mini coronavirus outbreak in their camp with about 15 persons, 7 players and 6 staff members all testing positive for the COVID-19 virus. Justin, I'm going to start with you because I know baseball is your baby, but for the league, can we look forward to more disappointments, more postponements, more delays? What's really going to happen?
It's only a matter of time, Marsha, before baseball has to shut its operations. And again, I kept saying, let me backpedal here. The biggest disappointment, no, at first I was, anti-Rob Manfred, the league office, right? But the more I think about this is the players doing utter madness. Now, I'm not sure how deep you read into this report, Marsha, with these 15 people being tested positive. Do you know what happened that led to this situation? Apparently,
they had a team building exercise.
A team building exercise outside of the compound inside a casino. What are you doing? You are privileged to play the sport you love for exorbitant amounts of money, and you are being asked in these times, please be smart. There are no restrictions, but go from the grounds to the bus to your hotel to the plane to your facilities and to home. Marsha, why on God's earth are you going to end up in a casino? And you know how packed those things are, and you know that no one in the casino is going to be wearing a mask. This tells me, right, that going forward, and again, the NFL keeps saying it's on the clock, you cannot leave these players in these sports to their own devices. We've seen it now in Major League Baseball. We saw it in cricket with Joe Archer going off route to go home instead of going straight into quarantine. We're seeing it all over. You cannot leave these players to their own devices. And the players
Legend
are
of the
again
Wings.
players
Legend
are
of the
again
Wings. It's Lou Williams.
Lou Williams going into Magic City, and we found out now that it's not just wings and breasts that he went for. Apparently, he wanted legs and thighs as well. Are the players are at fault for their clear irresponsibility? Marsha and Neil, what we have learned is that the Major League Baseball, watching the success of the NBA, proposed a situation where there would have been 2 or 3 bubbles, to mitigate against these circumstances, and the players all said no. And then turned around before the season and made it seem as if the owners and the league office were the people who were holding up the situation. And now we have a situation now where there are not 1, but 2 outbreaks within teams, leading to a number of cancellations and postponements. Unless there are restrictions and or bubble cases or bubble city scenarios, I do not see how this trend does not continue and go upward. And as I'm saying now, worse than the Major League Baseball, I know we're going to talk about NFL later on, but I must interject here, Marsha. The NFL is falling into the same trap. How are you watching the NBA do this with success? Because every round of testing we're seeing in the NBA bubble, there are 0 positive cases. And now you have watched Major League Baseball with 2 outbreaks in teams. And up to now, we have heard no mention of a bubble city proposal.
Potential bubble, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Or whether it be a bubble city or
multiple bubble cities, yeah.
Multiple bubble cities, or whether you are quarantining or sequestering the players to their team facilities, we have heard no proposals there. They are going to fall into the same trap that Major League Baseball finds itself in right now.
So, Neil, what do you think? Should we just call off baseball and look for it next year?
I think we should call off baseball, and as Justin was just alluding to, NFL go the same way. Football go because, I can't say any better than what. When you really look at it, the NBA got it right. As much as we didn't want them to do it, they got it right. Don't mind Lou Williams. Don't mind some of these other players that live in the bubble and doing their thing. The fact remains is that the protocols in place are there for a reason, and they're adhering to it 100%. Right? Now, I know we can get to the NFL, but let me deal with Major League Baseball right now. You have too many cases. You have too many lapses in protocol. I don't know if the guys are not taking it seriously. I don't know if the management, the administration in charge of dealing with the protocols are not taking it seriously. I don't know what it is. But the fact is that if you don't have these protocols in place, if you don't have stringent rules and guidelines on how to deal with these things, knowing that players are going to be there are a lot of players, there are a lot of teams, there are a lot of movement, there are a lot of games that need to be played. And the thing about it is baseball is not even a contact sport. So if your sport is not a contact sport, and you have all of these issues surrounding protocols and people testing positive and people breaking protocol, call it off. What are you doing it for? I mean, you know why they're doing it.
I was about to say, I can give you billions of reasons why they're doing
it. Yeah, for sure.
Like,
now,
Marsha,
go ahead.
Like, as I keep saying, you can't leave players to their own devices. You have, as Neil said, you have to put strict protocols in place. You can't leave anything to chance. You have to tell them, you can't do this, you can't do that. And as much as player associations will come and say, but hold on, the reality is both sides are going to benefit from having these protocols in place. The players will play and get their money, and the owners will reap the rewards of games playing, and they're getting their TV money. It is as simple as that. Players will say, oh, but you're restricting our freedom, our rights, our movement, etc., etc. But life has shown us over and over, you can't get things both ways. You can do whatever you want, but not for as long as you want.
Now, this is dominating the headlines coming out of baseball, but what really should have been dominating the headlines, Mr. Aaron Judge, New York, the Yankees' fifth consecutive home run game, the first for them in 13 years, A-Rod being the last person to do it. Justin, your thoughts on Mr. Judge?
I want to say, as much as I am a huge ant, but y'all would know every year that I go to New York, I must catch a Yankees game. When I see their roster from top to bottom, and we're not talking just Aaron Judge. You have Aaron Judge. You have Giancarlo Stanton. You have Gary Sanchez. You have Gleyber Torres. And then you pick up the big offseason addition in the arm of, oh my God, Garrett Cole, arguably the best pitcher in all of baseball, if not the second best. And then that rotation is bolstered by Masahiro Tanaka. Like, when you look through top to bottom, 1 through 9, and you look through their pitching rotation, and you look through their relievers, I want to say that this New York Yankee team, and I'm not talking about, with the exception of Murderers Row, that would have had Lou Gehrig and Mickey Mantle and stuff. So this is arguably the greatest New York Yankee teams, and I'm even talking about the Jeter teams of '98, etc. This may be one of the best Yankee teams that I have ever seen. This is easily, by roster alone, the best team in all of baseball. Only had, you could correct me there, Marsha, I think they only had 1 loss for the season. There's a reason that they are favored to make the World Series and to win it all. They're just really, I'd have to think hard. I'd have to be me, Justin Marville, being overly critical, and I'm already critical enough as it is, to find a real big hole in that Yankees roster. And quite frankly, unless a certain team besides finds a way to hit on garbage cans again and use signals to steal particular games, I just don't see anyone, with the exception of the Los Angeles Dodgers, and they are in the National League. I don't see anyone defeating the Yankees this year. I do think that they have to be overwhelming favorites. And if Aaron Judge is hitting like this, like 6 home runs in 5 games and homering in 5 straight games, like, I think the right hand is almost on the ball. Although it's early out.
So, New World, the MLB continues, turning our attention to NFL now. The NFL season might not even get underway. We're up to now 50 players opting out of the coming season due to, various reasons related to coronavirus and COVID-19. Do you think, or let's start with, will this number of players, 50 so far, but when you look at the size of these rosters, will this have a significant impact on the league actually getting underway?
I believe so. I think that, you have players, they look at one another. Well, first, I need to say this before we do it, right? Like, the Patriots, I won't be surprised if their whole team up. So of them playing next season, simply because of how they
eight of them have opted out so far. The most by any franchise.
They're trying their best right now because 8 already gone.
I just said, as the weeks go on, you can see more and more of those players just said, I'm feeling it. And that's only because Robert Kraft will be telling them, and Bill Belichick be telling them, you could opt out for another little $5,000 at the table or saying, because we don't want it. But on a serious note, I think that players are going to look at this thing and it's going to kind of spook players, right? So players, some may be educated, some may not be so educated about what's happening with the pandemic and what it really means. Some players think they're invincible. Some players think that it's not going to happen to them. But the fact remains, when you see players deciding wholeheartedly not to, like in the NBA, for example, most of the players, even though they had concerns, they wanted to play. Same thing with Major League Baseball. It just came down to money and reaching a deal with the owners, right? But when you see this, you see players saying, you know what, I don't think that I am going to put myself and my family at risk. It is not worth it. Considering what already you are worried about the CTEs and concussions and all these things going on. And then I think this is even a more overwhelming thing, the social injustices that are happening and how the NFL treats this type of protest and how they would like players not even to mention it. I think that's also going to be a very, it's almost like the pandemic is going to be an excuse for them to kind of say, you know what, Y'all want to let me kneel during the anthem. Y'all want me to let me kneel at the flag. Y'all don't want me to write anything on my jersey or on my shoes or anything like that. Forget it. It's not worth the risk. So I think that the NFL is in some serious problems. Patriots aside, I think that some players will want to play. I think there are 2 players already that have tested positive. Matthew Stafford and Gardner. What's Gardner's last name? I can't remember. But the quarterback for the Jaguars. Yes, for the Jaguars. They tested positive, right? So already players are felt like their peers being infected and testing positive for these things, right? And then we're seeing the snafus that are happening in the Major League Baseball and how they're treating this situation, right? And I know you have, because I saw a report just before we came on that the Saints are talking about renting 4 floors in a hotel for their team and staff. Like, at the end of the day, too, it's going to be a major cost. It's going to be a logistic nightmare when you're talking about 52, 53 players to have to shift around and then the practice and everything like that. I think some players just saying, you know what, it's not worth the stress, it's not worth the headache. I mean, the season hasn't started yet. So, just kind of don't let it play and nothing lost, nothing gained, right? That is my opinion. I think that NFL in some serious problems.
I think the NFL has an issue on its hand, but not because of the players opting out. When you look at other sports, particularly NBA, we know NBA is a star-driven league. Patrick Beverley put it best before they started the league by saying, we can say everything we want to say, but if LeBron James say that we're playing basketball, we're playing basketball. The NFL is not quite like that. As we know, like, regions and teams really dominate. That's why you always hear them talking about protecting the shield. And mere fact, part of the issue is that they wear helmets. So a lot of the players are not known by looking at face. They're not star driven or they're not star pushed. They're more like teams and regions and areas. That being said, as we've seen, of the 50 players are out, none of them are stars. Not one of them. And so the reality is there's no clout within these players that are opting out for to drive the league to position. My issue comes in that the league is doing something that I find horrible, for the lack of a better word. They are moving up the opt-out deadline to, I think, sometime this week. And the problem I have with that, we know how fluid the situation is. You can go from a situation where there's an outbreak in one state, like we saw like early on with New York, to with certain actions, again in New York, you can see that they can flatten the curve. In a fluid situation where you can have the virus and show no symptoms, or your area can immediately have an outbreak this one day, how are you putting these players' lives at risk by moving up the opt-out date? So you're basically forcing their hand.
And the thing is that is forcing their hand without a clear directive as to what the situation will be when the league actually opens.
Because that's one thing. Like, we're at the NFL, the first regular season game doesn't start until the first week of September. That's a month away. How are you then telling somebody? And we have seen with this virus how things can change quickly in a matter of days. How are you telling me that I have to opt in a month before the start of the season, where in my area or where we have to go and play, there may be a serious outbreak? And all these players have families. A lot of them have children. Oh my gosh. A lot of them have children. A lot of them have, oh my gosh. A lot of them have children. A lot of them spouses, whatever it may be, like aunts, uncles, older people you're taking care of. How is this a situation where you're telling them you have to opt in and you don't know what the virus situation is going to look like in your city in a month's time? Like, no, I have a serious problem with that. And it just goes to show me that you do not treat these players like human beings. Odell Beckham Jr. made that comment, I think, either yesterday or today. And I saw analysts crying him down for it. But, the sad thing is a lot are former players, and I'm not surprised. Like, how are you taking the defense of these owners when their actions continually show you that these players for them are pieces of property? Because if you thought of them as human beings, There is no way that you will be forcing them to opt in this early. Look at Major League Baseball. We have a situation where this weekend alone, Yoenis Cespedes of the New York Mets, though in my mind he did it the wrong way, opted out during the middle of the season. He opted out. I mean, granted, he could have let people know before the start of his game that he was not going to play and he would have opted out. But he opted out. How are you then turning around? And then you saw the NBA scenario. There were players that opted out and then at the last moment decided they're going to play. The same Lou Williams didn't know he was going to play or not. And then decided to go. Dwight Howard said he wasn't going to go. And the last minute opted in. So that's what it keeps showing you. Like, that's the reason why the NBA is such a well-run league and the NFL is not. And people, these analysts want to get away from the fact the owners don't look at their players as human beings. And I'm going to say this like, you can say how harsh that sounds, how overly critical that may be, but they don't care for words. Actions speak louder than words. And your actions by opting a month before the start of the season are showing me that these players' lives are not your priority.
I will be sure to be keeping a close eye on this development, and this conversation will definitely continue this Thursday in our special mailbag show on Instagram. That show featuring Justin and Neil is coming up every Thursday at 9 p.m. So you need to follow us on Instagram as well as on Twitter. We're also on YouTube where you can watch the replay of tonight's episode. And of course, we're here on Facebook. You're joining us. But that has been another episode of This Just In. Be sure to join us next week as we tackle a lot of the other, international and pro sport news, because as we see, a lot can happen in a week's time. That's it for us here. I am Marsha Boyce.
I'm Justin Marville.
I am the Neil Hoyte.
The Neil Hoyte. Have a good night.
I don't have a mark on my face, and I upset Sonny Liston, and I just turned 22 years old. I must be the greatest. I told the world, I talk to God every day. The God's with the kingdom matter here just the same. I shook up the world. I shook up the world. I shook up the world. I shook up the world.
I said, can I be a legend? Search your soul and answer me this question. Do you think I have what it takes to be great, but still be humble and learn from my mistakes? Shit.